Welcome to another episode of Sanity Killer Projects. This is going to be the part 2 of the clutch install. The video went quite a bit long, so we're splitting it up between the disassembly and the install. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We have lots and lots of content, especially on this XJ, and more coming up. Thanks. Okay, so the pilot bearing, as you see it now, is out. We tried a technique that we had seen on the internet. We thought it was kind of funny. It's called breading. Sometimes it's used in plumbing techniques, but you take bread and you stuff it into the hole, and then you take an extension and drive the extension down into it, and the force of the space being taken up from the bread forces the pilot bearing out. As interesting as that technique seemed, it didn't work, and it just made a giant mess, and we ended up having to put a puller in it anyway. So because of that, we're not showing the pilot bearing coming out, but I am going to show the pilot bearing going in. So one thing I want to make note of is inside your pilot bearing there is a seal on one side. That side needs to go towards the transmission, which would be this way. So what you do is you take your pilot bearing and you gently lay it in there, and without a lot of force, just tap it to get it started. And once it gets started, you just take a block of wood so that you're not banging onto the bearing, and you just drive it in flush. So keep walking this guy around until it goes all the way in and flush. Alright, well, I'll keep going on this and I'll bring back when we're done. Okay, so there's what it looks like in. The only notes I'll make on that is before you put the thing down, and put a very, very light coating of grease around the inside of the outside of the pilot bearing and the inside of the crankshaft. I also like to take a light coating of grease and just start it in here so that it keeps the needle bearings from rattling around while I'm beating it in. And then once everything is said and done, take a generous helping of grease and just lubricate everything inside of there so it has a nice coating on everything, because that's the only grease it's going to get until it comes back out. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the dust shield back up. It goes on really simply. This guy goes on in this direction and goes on these alignment holes, alignment tubes you can call them, on either side. There's not much to it. Sometimes it needs a little love just to go in. There we go. Okay, so with the flywheel set in place, the flywheel only goes on in one direction. I should have mentioned also that the dust shield between the transmission also only goes on in one position. The little indents that are in it, let me tilt down, little indents that are in it face away, and the starter opening goes, oh, can't see it with that. Starter opening goes on the passenger side, which is exactly the way it came off. So with this as we have it sitting here, I'm taking a little bit of blue Loctite and putting in the holes. The flywheel only mounts up in one position. If you try and put it on in any other position, it doesn't line up with the holes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start all these bolts, then I'm going to run them down until they all touch. Once they all are touching, I'm going to put a torque wrench on, and I'm going to torque up to 105 pounds. I'm not going to start on 105 pounds. That would be ridiculous, and it won't allow everything to set down smoothly You don't want to warp your flywheel, you don't want to twist it, you don't want to shatter it. The first bit is just to get them down to touch. And I got to take the holder one back out because I didn't Loctite it. So we'll run it down to touch and then start torquing. So there you can see it's back on and it's down and it's just up to touch. There's no torque on it, but we're gonna sneak up to it, so I'll probably end up doing like 50, 80, and then 105. You want to do that so that it pushes everything down against that crankshaft flush and even. Okay, so I'm going to show you the last pass. This will put it up to 105. If you see this thing on the side here, this is a flywheel turning tool. It's made so that you can turn the engine around using the flywheel. It's also used to hold the thing in place while you're turning it. If you try to torque these up to 105 foot-pounds using a block of wood or something jammed into it to try and stop it from turning, it's not going to work very well. And 105 foot-pounds is a lot of effort. So I'm going to start doing them. I'll do them at a cross pattern. Do that again so that it puts it down evenly. So here we go. That's one. Now you can't see, but with my other hand I'm actually grabbing the handle on the turning tool so that it locks up the flywheel. I would not recommend trying to do this without one of these tools. All right, and this will be the last one. All right, now the flywheel is properly installed. All right, so got a little bit of a further back angle. These are all 3/4 if I hadn't already mentioned that. So then the next thing that's going to go up is the pressure plate. We have a center force clutch. As you can see, there's a yellowy bit, and this side is flat. If you look at the other side, this bit sticks out. The part with the bit that sticks out goes towards the transmission. So to get the pressure plate into place, you take the tool that it comes with, you line it up, and you lay it right in to the pilot bearing. And that holds it in place. This is just a mechanism to make it so that you have a way to get the clutch up into place. Okay, per Center Force's instructions, you don't need any Loctite, or if you want to use Loctite, 1 drop is all that they recommend, which is all I've put on them. And we take the pressure plate bolts and start installing them. So Center Force says bring all the bolts up to touch, go a 1/4 turn past, and then set everything between 35 and 38 foot-pounds of torque. Because of the fact that I've wet them, which is what it means when you put a lubricant or a Loctite onto a bolt, I'm going to use the lower number because it'll actually push it closer to the higher number once the torque is set. So I'm going to set these down and then we'll come back and torque them. Okay, so I misspoke before when I said that Center Force said to go a quarter turn past snug. That's not actually what they asked. When I looked at it again, it said turn each bolt a 1/4 turn in a cross pattern until it draws the pressure plate up. The reason for doing that is so that you don't break the pressure plate trying to put too much force on one side of the thing. So You do that until you draw the pressure plate to touch just up till the bolts stop turning with light pressure. Then you torque it. Okay, so I am going to end up using a little bit of an extension that'll also drop the torque factor down just a hair because of the fact that I'm through an extension. So I'll grab my turning tool and we'll just go until she clicks. And then in a cross pattern, so we're going to go straight across to that bolt and bring it up to 35. And then we'll go up to this one. This one's going to be a little bit more difficult because the exhaust pipe's in the way. Sometimes you do things like leave the exhaust on for convenience so that you don't have to take as much stuff off, and then it ends up becoming inconvenient later. This is a common thing in mechanical jobs. Almost there, I think. There it is. Double check it. Go up to this guy. There's that one. And the last one down here at the bottom should be it. Even with a low torque like 35, it's still trying to spin the flywheel on me. Okay, so now each of them is torqued 35 foot-pounds. This is pretty much it for the flywheel side until we bring the transmission up. Make sure you leave this guy in here, even though the pressure plate is now putting force onto the friction material for the clutch itself. You don't want to pull this out until it's ready to go. All right, I made 3 solid attempts to try and show how to do this on camera, but unfortunately it was a little bit more difficult than I would have been able to show on camera. But the important part is your clutch fork has a side with a slot in it. Your pilot bearing has 2 little clips that wrap through it. What you need to do is take your pilot bearing, tip it down towards the clip side with the high spot in it. Get that to go down in first on both sides, and then lock underneath the little lip edge here. That keeps your pilot bearing in place and allows it to be able to articulate around as the bit moves. The opposing side from the slots is the side that is going to go onto the ball for the transmission. So the next thing we'll do is install this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little bit of grease. I'm going to grease this shaft here for the pilot bearing to slide on. Then I'll take a little bit of grease, I'll put it into the tooth section that's going to go into the back of the clutch, and eventually this will go into your pilot bearing. I'm not going to coat everything in a massive amount of grease. All of this is just going to be used for everything to help everything slide better once everything gets installed. So on your clutch fork, the side that's going to go on the ball, this little clip sits right over the top of this, like so. That is all it does. Then the pilot bearing and the clutch fork over this mechanism, and your piece on this side locks over that, like that. That's exactly how this guy stays on. It's amazing that this is the only thing that really holds your clutch release mechanism in place. This should all be able to freely move without grinding on anything. This little clip is one of the most common breaks on these transmissions, clutch mechanisms. But also, like I said, make sure that this travels freely up and down. This should look pretty much exactly like this. As you go to use your clutch, your slave master cylinder will push down on this. It'll engage into your clutch plate and release your clutch. So here's the transmission getting ready to go back into the clutch and mount back up to the engine. I got sick of waiting for people to give me a hand, so I ended up buying this thing. It's made by PT Performance Tools, like probably a little Chinese made adapter thing that allows you to position the transmission under $100. Couldn't really beat it. Unfortunately, there would have been almost no way for me to show you what exactly it was I did with me doing this 100% by myself right now. So what happens is the pointy part of your shaft needs to go into that pilot bearing that we replaced. You need to make an attempt to get the transmission as close to level with the engine at the same angle and lined up approximately with the bolt holes. If you can get it something like that, the pilot or the input shaft will catch the pilot bearing and start to go in. Once you get about that much further up, at least it feels like you move the transmission about that much, the spline gear needs to then line up with the clutch. So to get it to do that, you can either spin the output shaft, which is the back end, the tail where that accordion looking thing is, shock boot looking thing, or you can spin the transfer case shaft and output end. So you get it up to where it's basically almost touching it, and then I call it plunking it. You turn this gently until it goes plunk, and when it plunks, it means that the input shaft is now lined up into the clutch plate itself. So once you get it to there are two alignments on your dust shield here. Those bolts will actually, they're the longest ones that you have. Those will actually help you get it to where it's like this. Once you get these started on this side and on the opposing side, you're basically there. So at this point, I've just got to slowly walk this gap closed, then start buttoning everything up. Okay, so now that we have everything bolted up on the bell housing, I want to go over a few things. There are 6 bolts that hold the transmission in place. These guys right here take an 18 millimeter. There's 2, one on each side. This guy right here is a 13 millimeter, and then there are the 2 alignment ones, which are right here. And then these are going to be harder to see. I have to move further back to even try and get them, but there are 2 E12 bolts on the top of the transmission. Basically where my finger is, right here on either side. Okay, so the 10 millimeter bolts on this get torqued down to 25 foot-pounds. The 12 millimeter bolts get torqued down to 42 foot-pounds. This guy up here, the alignment ones, when I was putting them on, they took 5/8. I already mentioned these were an 18. The starter, I didn't check the torque on it. I just torqued it to German torque spec, which is what I call good and tight. 14 millimeter, put this bottom one on. 15 millimeter, put the top one on. And then the bolts that are like this, that are 13, there are 2 of them up towards the top. Also, this hose is actually attached to it. Earlier in the video I mentioned that this may be like a vacuum. It's not, it's a overflow in case the transmission overpressurizes. There's this attachment point on the driver's side, which is right here, and this line just goes up and over and around and up onto this. So that's all the hardware. The other thing I did too is I took off the alignment one here because the slave master cylinder has a bracket that goes onto that. So one of the connectors you can see right there, what my finger is pointing at right there, attached to the bell housing. It actually comes up into the engine compartment, and it snakes around, and it goes to this connector right here. You need to make sure you get that one back in. There are 4 total on the car, 4 total electrical connectors. Just wanted to note that one because if you don't, you're not going to have everything working right. So I could also show you one of the dust shield bolts. It is down there, right in there. Very hard to see, but basically my finger is pointing at it right there. Okay, so everything else is underneath. Okay, clutch, slave cylinder goes in with these 2 1/2-inch bolts. Sometimes the stud comes out, sometimes it doesn't matter either way, just as long as you get the bolts back in and they're down and tight. I'm not going to give a torque spec for that one either. Those are small bolts and I just tighten them down by hand. You also have your vent tube, vent hose for your transmission connector here, and then behind on the back side of the, oh, it's hard to move around here, on the back side of the transfer case, there's a connector there by the output shaft, and then there is the connector on this side that comes off of this sensor right here. Okay, so when you're putting the crossmember on, like I mentioned, hang it off of this and then put it on. So these bolts right here, I didn't get a torque spec for them. I put them down, as I say, German spec, just tight as I could get them. I also put some Loctite in it. The reason I did that is because there's a rubber pad that it sits on. These are prone to vibrating and falling out. My bolts over here aren't going to be the same as stock ones, so there's no real point to go over them. I would put one side on, keep it loose, get the other side into position, get the transmission into position. This is basically what I did. And then move the crossmember around until you get it to line up with the 4 holes for here. You want to make sure when you put these 4 in that you don't strip them. It's really easy to do because the casing for the transmission is aluminum. Just get those nice and lined up first, and then snug most of the way down, and then do your other side. You can use a pry bar or something to work it back and forth to get it in position. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the transmission. This plug right here on the passenger side of the car is your drain plug. That one stays in. This is your fill and check hole. I'm going to take this guy out, but I'm not going to fill from here. And the reason why is because I have the stick out of it, so it would make way more sense to fill it from there. So for right now, this is going to come out, and I'm going to fill it from up inside the cab. And then I'll just watch for stuff to come out of here, and once it starts coming out of here, I know it's done. Okay, so as you can see, much easier way to fill the transmission. Literally just snip the top off the bottle and let her drain right into the stick hole. You can end up spilling a little bit, but this is literally the easiest way to do it. As you can see, I spilled a little. It happens, just wipe it up. I'm just using 80/90. That's the standard for this stuff. This transmission is not worn out, so it's a good weight for it. All right, once you have that little puddle going, put the drain plug back in there, and then put the 4 12mm bolts in that hold your stick in place, and make sure your stick went in properly. all my gears are working, so I'm in the right spot, and this is neutral, so that's exactly where it should have been. And I remember to leave my transmission in neutral and then dropped it straight in. Now we're to reassembling the center console. There are 7mm bolts on the inner boot. There is a bunch of stuff in here. You have to put it in at an angle, drop it down, reconnect your vent hose, all at the same time. You need to install, there are 3 10mm bolts that hold in the e-brake. There are four 10mm bolts that hold in the mount plate for the little computer. If you took the little computer off, there are 3 bolts underneath the computer. And then there's this plastic little tabletop bracket, which is kind of junk. As you can see, mine's already cracked and it's broken on this side, but you install the 3 bolts that hold those in. There's 2 on each side and 1 here, and then set the console down. There's only a couple more things that have to be done onto the console, and then it'll be all put together. Okay, so on this there's a light bulb that plugs in the back of the bezel. There's nothing that holds it in place but pressure. You just push it in and it seats. There's 1 Phillips head screw in here. There's also 1 Phillips head screw in here. There are 4 Phillips head screws in the glove, the center console, and then there are 2 that fix the lid into place. Then the next thing that we're going to do is put the boot back on. That's this guy. Let's see if we can do this one-handed. This goes on like this. It just clicks into place. So this is the knob. I dinged it up a little bit, screwdrivering it out, and I broke the little cap, the plate on it, taking it out. So that's not going to go back into place. I've got something special. Alright, so there it is. I bought myself a anodized aluminum red shifter knob to match a car. I don't normally treat myself to stupid little things like this, but since I broke the stock one, I put on one that I got from eBay. Nothing super expensive, but kind of makes it look cool because it matches the color of the car. So that's the interior. All of the interior is back together. This piece, if you've taken it off before, it just pushes back on. There's no bolts that hold it in place. So now we gotta finish up the underside. You can see all the drive shaft linkages are on. That's the front one, attached to the front axle, and here's the connection point there. And then the rear is attached there, and there's the slip yoke. Just so you know, make sure you clean everything, lube everything going into here, because if you don't, you're going to end up having issues with all sorts of things. But lube inside of it, lube the spline itself as you put it on, and then slide it on. 8mm, they don't go super tight. You can put a little bit of Loctite on them. Definitely want to make sure they're tight, because if you don't, that's pretty much what's driving your car, those little tiny bolts. So make sure they're in and good. Okay, so the transfer case linkage is in. What it is that I got for this thing is the as is design works for the XJ and MJ with a MP231 or 242 transfer case. I already have it hooked up. I'll show you the under workings in a minute, but just to show you how it goes into 4 high, nice and easy, goes into neutral, nice and easy, goes into 4 low, nice and easy. No more slop like it used to have. There's no you know, goofy little washers and stuff on this setup, so it's not that old hung setup that I removed. It's a much cleaner, much nicer setup, and it works much better than the stock. So let me show you what it looks like underneath. So this is the actual assembly. It has these 2 little wing tabs on either side of this plate right here that lock it onto your shifter lever, and then a bolt goes through it. Then it has a couple Heim joints on either side that allow you to extend or retract the linkage. Oddly enough, mine just goes almost all the way down. It fits in all the gears and everything's set up that way. Use your stock nut on their bracket. This is a US made product. The one funny thing about this is I tried to get it direct from them. It was actually $9 more expensive than going to more expensive than going to Walmart.com, and I ended up buying it on Walmart. When I emailed them, let them know what was going on, they said they fixed the problem, so they increased the price by $1, which doesn't offset the cost of the shipping and tax. And with everybody's money getting tight nowadays, I was shopping around anyway. I wanted to get this one because this is the one that I know that's American made. So that's why I got this. Let me show you how it works. I can only really go to 4 high with this because I can't pull the linkage the other direction, but all it does is shuttle the transfer case along with this bar. And the setup removes all the old stuff that used to be up here and the bracket that was sitting along here. Don't need any of that stuff anymore. So it moves nice and smooth, clicks in good and hard because the transfer case I have is in pretty good shape. So that's that. The last thing I need to do is hook the negative lead back up to the battery. Car's been off for quite a long time. So we'll just hook this guy on. Run the nut back down by hand. And tighten her back down. So that's basically it. I'm going to drive it around a little bit and see how it runs, and then we'll go. Okay, so this is absolutely the first time that I've driven this car in probably 2 to 3 months. As you can see, we're in neutral. The clutches on these, they're hydraulic, so you don't need to adjust it. You can adjust the pedal, but it doesn't really need to be done. As you can see, went right into first gear, no problem. And then we'll stop here, put it into 4 high. Now we're in 4-wheel drive high. Neutral, got no gear, that's perfect. And 4 low. And it takes off nice and hard because we're in 4 low. Okay, so all of the gear selectors work on the transfer case thanks to that Azzy's design works. And then we'll put it in 4 high and we'll go through some gears. There's no chatter in the clutch, no noise. It all goes in nice and smooth. And then we'll open her up a little bit, bang some gears. See, it's driving exactly as it's supposed to. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll keep making more videos. Thanks.